He missed out on the Bakelite patent by 1 day.
And I decided to make a movie.
I continue to think about what is the opportunity.
I know what all your buyers want. They all want the same thing.
Collaborating to cultivate that new framework.
I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart. You just heard some snippets from tonight's show, and our guests were amazing. So stay tuned for the whole story.
I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart.
Welcome to Passage to Profit, the show that's all about innovation, entrepreneurs, and the intellectual property that helps them flourish. Tonight on our show, we have some very special guests. I can't wait to hear from them. Let me ask you, what is the most important invention of the last century?
I would have to say the computer, personal
See,
computer.
I knew you were going to say that, but it's not you. But the thing is you couldn't have a computer without this material, right?
Well,
So
we'll
we're
find
gonna-
out what that is.
We're going to be talking about plastic. And so with us tonight are Hugh Karraker and John Maher, who have produced a video about Bakelite. And it's really a documentary about how Bakelite was the first plastic, the first synthetic material. And it's really a wonderful video. So if you get a chance to watch it, you should. They'll be on in a little bit talking about this incredible invention. And then as our executive spotlight, we have Adhav, who's going to be talking about Leasecake. And if you're wondering what Leasecake is, you're going to have to stay tuned and hear about it.
I don't think it's edible. And then we have two incredible presenters. So honestly, have you ever walked into someone's house and gone, oh my gosh, this looks like something out of House Beautiful. How did they do that? Well, Cindy did it. so she'll be telling you all about that. And then we have Matt Strandberg. So he takes a holistic approach to helping you live your best life possible. And how does he do that? He'll tell us how.
Boy, I'd sure like to learn how to do that and learn how to live my best life. I think that sounds like a fantastic idea. But before we get to our guests, we have IP in the news. And so what are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we kind of have a theme going with plastic.
We
So
do.
one of the things that people complain about with plastic is it sticks around forever, but there have been many methods to recycle it. And a patent was just issued last month, I think, or maybe in June 2021, for a new method of recycling plastic and making it into a fuel.
Right. And what's interesting about this patent is that they use a method of cracking, which is similar to how they create petroleum products. And they crack the plastic and they use that to create fuel. So obviously, there's more energy that has to be put into the process than you get out, but at least you get some energy out in the form of a liquid fuel.
Okay.
So the other thing is that they're using a catalyst for this. So for a lot of chemical reactions that wouldn't go or would go extremely slowly are speeded up by using a catalyst. So that is probably part of what they have patented. We couldn't get the patent to come up this morning.
Yes, we
know.
could.
I couldn't.
Well, I could.
couldn't. So
But I just printed out the excerpt there. So
yeah, so
it's really it's a neat idea.
so it's taking a waste product and turning it into fuel. So
So in any case, why don't we go to Richard's roundtable and we can talk about this patent, or you can ask any other question that you have about intellectual property. So, John, what are your thoughts? You're an experienced, you're alive in the world of chemistry these days, so maybe you have some comments.
I think one of the big questions today is how do we get control of this plastic monster? I think plastic is wonderful in most applications, but the single-use plastic thing is out of control.
that's a good point. And as you can see, there's innovation around trying to solve that problem with this patent that was recently issued. So hopefully, people are so innovative, we'll come up with even better and better ways to recycle the plastic and make it repurposed for something else.
Yeah, but how about we stop making certain things out of plastic?
I'm okay with that.
Is
But-
the industry okay with that?
No, absolutely not. They make a lot of money from
It
plastic.
takes two to tango. It takes two to
Right.
tango. It's the customer and the corporate folks. Yeah, they want to put money in their pocket, but we're going to be up to here with this stuff. We are already. We got to talk about this.
Absolutely.
Well-
That's a great point. Hugh, do you have any comment?
Well, I like to throw it back on my great grandfather because he invented this stuff. And my feeling about it is that if he were alive today, he would be working on a solution to the plastic problem.
Based on what I saw in the documentary, it sounds like that would be very consistent with your grandfather's
Right.
thinking.
And
Tosh?
he would do it in the industry. He would go to the government. He would go to the petrochemical industry and try to do it holistically.
Yeah, and I in watching part of your documentary, I did actually see that there was some footage there that talked about this issue and some of the things that they're trying to do to improve the recyclability of certain types of plastics.
Thank you for bringing that up, Richard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I have another
Taj?
thought about plastics.
Okay.
I have, I'm an autism advocate. I have a son that had severe autism, and when he was born in 1989, and 1 in 10,000 kids were being diagnosed with autism. Now it's 1 in 50, and in New Jersey, it's 1 in 32 kids are being diagnosed with autism. And people ask me all the time, what is causing that? And I don't have an answer, but I look at things, in my mom's generation, nobody had it. And now in this generation, so many kids have it. And so I look at what has changed over all the time, and I look at what are we eating? What are we ingesting? I remember when microwaves were invented, and look at all the GMO foods and all the chemicals that are in everything. And I have to wonder what's happening genetically to my generation that's giving birth to these children. I'm not saying I'm blaming plastics, but I'm just saying I'm looking at, what type of chemicals have entered our bodies over the past, 50 years that's causing change in our body. So I don't know. I'm not blaming.
And that's a very good point. That's a very good point. And I have a theory on it. So my theory is it's the arsenic in the baby food, because we started using arsenic as an insect killer years ago, and it got into the water and it got into the rice. And if you measure the level of arsenic in rice baby food, it's way too high. And so I do think that there is some sort of chemical imbalance in the world that is causing this. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Tosh, do you have a comment?
Yeah. So I think Hugh hit on it right. So with great power comes great responsibility. I think anyone that has this amazing idea that transforms societies, transforms the world, whether it's plastics, whether it's social media, whether it's computers, whether it's, any, cell phones, I think that, without question, it has changed. But there is, this natural kind of pendulum, right, where you need to have checks and balances. And I think with innovation and entrepreneurship and people that create these problems, quote unquote, should also look for potential solutions and really try to step back. But I think it really speaks to the spirit of entrepreneurship, whether it's this new patent that you all are talking about. When you look at, what's happened with social media, some would say that this is a great thing. People are so connected. Then you look at the pendulum swinging to privacy and what's Apple doing around that. I think it really comes down to, it's all upon us to figure out what the problems are that we want to attack and decide to, find a technology solution, a chemical solution, and put forth a patent that can kind of bring everything back in line. I mean, it's an incredible dynamic. It's really one of the strengths of our system here in the US, but I think even globally.
Well, we got to
Right.
figure out, I think, are we in an economy or a society? If this is an economy, then it's just all about stuffing money in our pockets, which appears to be what's going on to my mind right now. If we are a society, we have to think about what's good for everyone, not just the folks that have the power to just pump out products without thinking about the result.
That's an interesting perspective. And I would also point out that part of the reason for having an economy is to maintain our culture and our way of life. And having an economy gives us an advantage on the world stage, which the U.S. has enjoyed for a long time. Ultimately, that leads to a safer country, but at what cost, right? So those are very complicated decisions for sure. Matt, what do you have to contribute to this?
Yeah, I think this is a really important issue, and actually very much epitomizes a lot of the situations that we find ourselves in today, which is that we are facing a lot of extremely complex problems. And I think how this relates to intellectual property and entrepreneurship is, in the past, people have often thought of the entrepreneur as the mythic individual, but any entrepreneur here knows that you really only are as strong as your team, and that in order to tackle complex problems, you need to work together as a team to address this from various angles and various perspectives. And I think, in relation to intellectual property, you can have a really great idea, and at the same time, you learn throughout that process, wow, there's actually lots of steps required to take that idea from simply, a figment of the imagination, and then kind of making that into a concept, and then manifesting that into a material process. And the intellectual property component is just one part of many. And so it's really great to expand your network as an entrepreneur and work together, because what you begin to realize is there's so many different components of that process to make your dream a reality. And I think this topic right here presents the intersection of all those various components, the creative thought processes, but then all the different aspects of manifesting that idea into production. So that's my viewpoint in the relation to what this has to offer.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, that's really great. And we appreciate you bringing that up. I mean, one of the things that Passage to Profit is for is to increase awareness of intellectual property for people who are at the early stage of their business, and they need to think about, what are going to be the barriers to entry for competition? How can I take all the hard work that I put into this project and try to at least minimize the chance that somebody else is just going to duplicate it, maybe a larger company with a bigger budget? And so intellectual property is one of the tools that can help protect the business as it goes forward. And I think it's good just that people know and understand that this is out there. And so I really appreciate what you've just said. So that was a really awesome discussion, everybody. So happy to hear all the different opinions. They're all absolutely valid. And we'll be right back after this commercial break. You're listening to Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart on iHeartRadio, WOR 710, the voice of New York. Welcome back, everybody, to Passage to Profit. And I have to be a little bit honest with our audience this evening, because when I'm a chemist, my wife is a chemist, we were both trained as chemists before we got into the whole intellectual property thing. And I'm kind of a plastics nut. I spent a lot of time working for companies that made plastics. And so I have that point of view. But I was really wondering, is this something that our audience is going to get excited about? Well, it turns out that if you watch the documentary that our guests created, it's well worth your time.
It's very interesting.
And not just because of the chemistry part. There's a few chemistry parts in there. But for example, the video starts where an interviewer walks around and asks people, well, what is Bakelite? And you should have heard some of the answers that we're giving. It's hilarious. And we're living in an age now where plastic is so ubiquitous that and so taken for granted that we forget that somebody had to invent this. So our guests this evening, Hugh Karraker and John Maher, are the producers of a video, All Things Bakelite, The Age of Plastics, and they're here to tell us about it. So welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. And why don't you tell us a little bit about the video and what inspired you to make it?
Well, I can tell you that off the bat, my mother wanted to write a biography about her grandfather, and she never got to it. So she had all his journals and diaries and papers and photographs. And when she passed away, she gave them to me. So I had to do something with them. And I decided to make a movie. And I found John Maher, and we went and did a movie.
So Hugh,
Over
you're
9
actually,
years.
so Hugh, you're actually related to the man who invented Bakelite, which is the
My
first
mother
plastic.
was his granddaughter.
Your mother was his granddaughter.
Yeah.
So that's great. I mean,
Yeah, it was the first synthetic material ever created.
Exactly. Yes.
And by synthetic, we mean up until that time, people just used things that were found in nature and used them to, wood, cloth comes from cotton. Everything was very natural.
But
Plastic,
they used to blend sawdust and bull's blood and mold it like they do mold now today into little trinkets and various objects that they needed. And then they made billiard balls out of ivory. And when that became too expensive and too many elephants died, John Hyatt invented celluloid. So celluloid was a form of plastic, but not totally synthetic. Then my great-grandfather came along, and the rest is history.
wow. So, John, what's it like to make a documentary like this?
Well, I think the first thing is the dance of the tarantulas. That's what I call the early relationship you have with somebody that you're going to be working with very intensely, very intimately for a long time on a lot of elements. And so the beginning is really getting to know your business partner, so to speak. And I think you guys could all relate to this. I call it the dance of the tarantulas, but you just sort of see, I think you was looking at me and I was looking at him. Are we honorable people? Are we competent? How crazy are we? Are we just crazy enough? Do we have the resources to do this? And are we thinking along the same lines? So I was actually making another film, another documentary, and I needed some dancers, and you and Sherry Karraker are terrific dancers. So that's how I met Hugh. And I think after that, he was spying on me for a while in terms of how well I work with my crew and my committee and all this stuff in making a couple of other history films. And then he invited me into the world of Bakelite.
so this is actually your third documentary. Is that right, John?
No, this is like my ninth.
Oh, you're ninth. Okay,
Yeah,
my notes
I
are
made
wrong.
a number of ones earlier. This is my 23rd film, and I think it's my 8th or 9th documentary, depending on how you count it. But yeah, so I think I have a pretty good experience in documentary work, and I have a great crew, a wonderful editor, Craig Mkhitaryan, Marty Fiji, all original music, and people I've worked with. I hate to say it, but for in some cases 35 years. So it's fun to have a little film family together for that period of time and do, I think, what we like to think is good work along the way. The film's available in 5 languages on iTunes, Apple TV Plus, Google Play, YouTube, and Vudu Domestic. So it's out there, and you can always find about the film on allthingsbakelite.com. And actually, if you just root around for Bakelite, you'll probably end up connecting with us. So
I think that your grandfather Hugh may have been ahead of his time, because I watched a little bit about his personality and his quirkiness and some of his characteristics. But one of the things that he said was that, what is the use of money if you are like a squirrel in a cage? So Bakelite had become a huge success. He was making tons of money. And this was back before there were cell phones or even telephones, I think. No social media, nothing. And he was too busy signing papers and looking at documents to actually enjoy his life. And so, he kind of pointed out, what good is all this money if I don't have time to enjoy it? And I thought that was a very insightful part of your grandfather's personality.
Yes, there's a section in the movie that describes that whole process. And it's my understanding.
I like how he says the word squirrel. Squirrel. What is it funny if I'm like a squirrel? A squirrel. That applies.
Richard, Rich,
go ahead.
I was going to say, Richard, you were right. It's like he was definitely way ahead of his time, and that's incredible history, right? For Hugh to be, have that kind of relationship. But reminds me of that line from The Graduate, right? There's a great future in plastics. When you think about it,
that too.
right?
I gotta ask you guys, so who holds the patent on Bakelite?
There's a company called Hestion. They just changed their name to Synthetics, Bakelite Synthetics. And they're headquartered in Kentucky now. They were in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm in contact with them. They hold the trademark. The patent is long gone.
It's long expired, yeah.
Yeah, but the trademark is owned by this one company.
Well, John, can you tell us the story about the patent? Because there's an interesting story there that...
Oh, yeah. Talk about saved at the nick of time. To get this right, LHB filed the British Bakelite patent on February 18th of 1907. And James Swinburne in England, and correct me if I'm wrong, he had something so similar to Bakelite. He filed his patent the next day, February 19th. And so he missed out on the Bakelite patent by 1 day.
And
that's right.
And so afterwards, there were many patents filed, right? Many modifications and iterations. And with that intellectual property, it really helped build the business, right?
And I think one of the things that and you might can expand on this, but Leo Baekeland defined his process in the patents very, very carefully and very completely. So it was very hard to get around his Bakelite patent. Do you have any more sense of that?
Yes, as he did with his Velox photographic paper, he left out some details in the process so that they had to call on him to finish the process and make it work. In Germany at the time, a company was making Bakelite, the similar product, phenolic resin. But Bakelite heard about this, went over there, and negotiated a license for the company under the Bakelite name in 1909.
In 1909. So it's fascinating to me as an intellectual property professional that people were licensing intellectual property since the turn of the 19th century, right? Yeah. So you think of this as a kind of a more modern approach, but probably back in the early 1900s, these kinds of contracts were probably not that prevalent. So to that extent, it sounds like your grandfather
great grandfather
was great grandfather.
I'm sorry, was well ahead of his time. So
yes, he was very sharp, and he had good lawyers.
Well, I wish I was his lawyer. I'll tell you that much. It would have been a great project to work on. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you touched on something else. He invented other things too, besides just Bakelite, right?
Yes.
So he was one of these very ingenious people who was very much into innovation and a serial inventor. We have some clients like that at Gearhart Law.
Repeat offenders is what we call them.
And, that's really, I think, what has made this country flourish a lot is we have so many innovative people and a strong patent system.
And he was brought up in a poor family. Shoemakers was his father. And he's determined to make money in his life. That's what brought him to America. As a chemist, he went to America because that was the age of invention, the turn of the century.
Right. Yeah, I used to work at Dow Chemical, and I read the Dow story, and he was always fighting with the Germans over the chemical products, right?
Well, that's right. If you were in chemistry and you needed to learn a second language, they always encouraged German as being the second
because
language.
the research.
We have the movie in German.
Yeah.
So this has been fantastic discussion, and I love learning about Bakelite. We have to go to a commercial break, but we'll be right back. This is Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. Welcome back, everybody, to Passage to Profit. We're just having the time of our lives. If you could hear what we were just talking about, I think you'd almost prefer that to the show. But anyway, coming up next, we have Taj Adhav from Leasecake, and Taj made a donation to
Action Against Hunger, even though Leasecake doesn't have any real cake. So thank you for the donation to Action Against Hunger.
So Taj, after you tell us what Leasecake is all about, you have to tell us why you chose that name.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. No, thanks so much, Richard, Elizabeth. So Leasecake is the operating system for lease and location management, right? We make the commercial real estate management of locations easier for commercial tenants. So what does that really mean? Here's the problem that I encountered probably about 5-6 years ago. My background, I was a CPA for 15 years. I worked with Disney as an Imagineer, a couple $1 billion in commercial projects, and helped launch a small tech company that, over 12 years exited to Google. So I have this sense of like lots of different things were working in my head. And it's almost feels like I've been training for this all my life. So what happened 6 years ago at a diner over a cup of coffee with a friend of mine, he was managing a commercial real estate portfolio with 50 tenants and 9 buildings. And I was out of a job. I was just always looking to network and see kind of what was around the corner. And he said that, I'm losing track of things. I'm forgetting renewal options and lease expirations for all of my tenants in my buildings. And I said, well, Jim, he's now our co-founder, by the way. I said, wait a second. So it's just dates and dollars and reminders, what's going on? And he said, well, there's spreadsheets, there's Dropbox, and there's Post-it notes and calendar alerts, but none of those are really connected in a way that solves my problem. So I was frankly surprised. I said, I can't believe this, right? This is probably 2015. And I said, an app doesn't exist, right? Everybody in commercial real estate,
isn't there an app for everything?
I know, right? Exactly. Everybody in business, owns or leases commercial real estate, right? Where's the app for that? And so it just kind of stuck in my head. And I'm very much entrepreneurial driven, but it's not just about dreaming ideas and saying, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? It was really based on a series of questions that I kept asking them. 2 years went by, and I just, started to keep thinking about lease management should be easy. My parents were commercial tenants for 10 years. He was a landlord, but my parents were commercial tenants. And I saw their journey, right? Growing up, they built a laser component company. They moved here to Central Florida. They bought a building. They became landlords overnight. They built their own building. Some of their products went up on the space shuttle, believe it or not. They put their kids through college. So with kind of both sides, I continue to think about what is the opportunity. And I got fortunately invited to a Techstars Global Startup Weekend event. And this was about 3.5 years ago. So right, a couple of years have gone by. It's still noodling on in my head. I got invited to this event to be a mentor. And it turns out, as I got the invitation on that Friday night for that weekend, build a company, get a working prototype, get a first paying customer, you might win the city, right? Because it was a global event. It turns out that I wrote the pitch on a cocktail napkin. I put it in my back pocket. And I said, I don't even know if I'm going to pitch this, but I decided to buy the domain name. So this is for $12. I said, Lease Management Made Easy. Man, Leasecake. I mean, I love wordplay, rhymes with cheesecake. It's a piece of cake. There's so many layers. And I just kind of went for it. And I asked Jim, hey, I'm going to be at this thing. Is it okay to pitch? And it turns out we ended up winning Orlando. 2 weeks later, we won North America. And then 3 weeks later, we won globally across 58 countries, all from this simple cocktail napkin and the idea of Leasecake. It's easy to really help landlords and tenants focus on keeping track of lease expirations, renewals, permits, and licenses. Everything in business that has a punitive deadline that needs to be tracked, that you need to get ahead of, is really what we do. And we've been fortunate to really grow and scale the company. We're VC backed, we're early stage, but man, the first couple of years, it was tough, but super exciting with how we started from that cocktail napkin to where we are today.
Well, it's funny because when you do rent something, or let's say you're looking at it from the renter's point of view, you think the landlord has everything, all their ducks in a row and everything in perfect order and knows exactly what's going on. And half the time they don't, right? Like, we have friends that have rentals and they're like, oh, when a rental changes, like this is a house rental, then you have to get a new certificate of occupancy in this town. Like,
sure,
who knew?
Yeah, right. well, it's so the irony is, as entrepreneurs, you always have to kind of listen, and the market will take you in different directions. But I always knew that we were a platform for both sides, for landlords and tenants. And it turns out, and it's great that you bring this up, Elizabeth, because we originally built it for landlords. But we always thought, and that was the vision for this patent pending, right, that we're still going through, is a way to connect tenants with the critical documents that are part and parcel of their lease, right? There's always two parties to a commercial real estate lease. And some of these leases are 2 years, 5 years, 30 years, 80 years. And so it's kind of the wild, wild west, but it turns out that more and more often within the first 6 months of launching, when we showed Leasecake to tenant operators, we were talking like law firms and franchisees, Papa John's, Moe's, etc. There's a whole bunch of areas where they said, man, I need Leasecake just as much as the rich landlord. And so from that, it just really reinforced our idea that this was a platform play where if we can build an application that helps both sides of the equation, even though they're completely at odds with each other, tenant operators now represent close to 80, almost 90% of our business, because frankly, that's the big missing part of how business is conducted in this country, right? Everybody owns or leases commercial real estate. And it turns out 30% of tenants are landlords too in the commercial real estate space. So you can never really be just one or the other. And landlords typically are the ones that are definitely empowered. They've got the real estate background and the experience. And these tenant operators that are, the mom and pops that say, hey, I want to open up a new Burger King, or I want to open up a new Domino's, or I want to open up a new salon suite. They're looking to really be a part of the economy and build up their own legacy for themselves and their families, right? And then move from one location to 5 to 10. So that's really the market that we're in. And we're really happy to say that many of our customers have 100 locations, 500 locations. We're selling to franchisors, franchisees, corporate brands as well. I mean, construction companies, luxury retailers, banks, and also private equity. So it's kind of this untapped market. And but it doesn't just come from dreaming up, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, right? Yeah. It is about a problem and asking repetitive questions, say why, what,
Yeah,
and come up with the idea.
I think that's that's a great point you make about really being in touch with the market and really knowing what the customers want and what they need, and making sure that your product conforms to that. And one of the other things I really liked about what you said was that usually the landlords are in the position of power because they know what the real estate market is like. They've been through the process a lot of times, so they know kind of where their advantage is, where their leverage is, and they can sort of get the best deal from themselves, maybe a little bit sometimes at the expense of the tenant. And having a product that sort of democratizes that a little bit and allows tenants to foresee and plan and learn enough to make sure that they get the best deal is really an outstanding feature. I think that would be attractive to a lot of commercial and maybe eventually residential. Have you ever thought about going into the residential market too?
Yeah, it could be kind of a one size fits all. The residential market it's a bit of a different animal. There are tons of different players in that space, and residential is typically, it's 1 year lease, and it's a showing, it's move in, and it's maintenance, and then it's move out, and then you kind of have to redo it over and over. In commercial real estate, it's kind of the last frontier of innovation. I mean, it's very paper based. It's very either spreadsheet based or legacy software systems that are more purpose built for, hey, how can I cram as many tenants into this space, make as much money. It's about compliance. It's about project management. But on the flip side, tenants are faced with, geez, what other solutions are out there, right?
Right.
Many of them are trying to use Monday.com or Asana or
Right.
Salesforce to get it to work.
Right. So that was another point I wanted to make is, like, we have a bunch of different programs at Gearhart, but I just found a great program that's kind of soup to nuts for our marketing, which I'm going to use because I get to use one platform. But I can tell that John has something he wants to say.
It's all about, as Taj said, identifying a need and filling it.
So Taj,
Yep.
was it hard to get all of the programs that you needed into one place? Because you're doing a lot of different things with this system. And then Richard's telling me that this is the last question and we have to.
No
move on,
worries.
but-
No worries. Yeah. So, was it hard? Yes, it was hard, but I think, end of the day, it's dates and dollars and reminders. The complexity was making it simple, right?
Mhm.
Nobody wants difficult anymore. They literally, work off of their mobile device. And so how do you build an application where there's no training manual, right? When was the last
Right.
time you looked up a training manual for LinkedIn or setting up your iPhone? That's how that was the complexity, making it really consumer centric design in a way that people immediately get it. And I think that's one of our huge differentiators. You don't need 2 weeks of training.
So, yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. It sounds like, and where can people find your app and find out more about your company?
Sure. Yeah. Go to leasecake.com and you can, choose what persona, what is your specific pain point, whether you're a tenant, whether you're a tenant rep broker, whether you're looking for new accounting standard solutions that we offer as well. So yeah, leasecake.com.
Sounds great. Thanks for joining us, Taj. Taj Adhav from Leasecake, and lease your cake, don't buy it. That's the moral of the story. So on that note, we'll be back after this message. Passage to Profit with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart coming up right after this. Welcome back, everybody. Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart with Passage to Profit, our special guests, Hugh Karraker and John Maher. And we're now on to our fireside presentation. So Elizabeth, tell us what's been going on.
So I will. So as you know, if you've listened to the show before, Fireside is a video directory of small businesses that I've been working on for about 1.5 years now. And it's coming along. But one interesting thing I've never really talked about that we were talking about during a break was it came to me in a dream. I woke up at 4 a.m. with the idea in my head. And John brought up a really good point about dreaming.
Yeah, you got to give yourself space to daydream.
Yeah. Then Matt had a comment on that too.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of people work under the assumption that when they're busy, they're being their most productive. And so people often overschedule and overbook. And what we often find when we look into literature, the arts, as well as entrepreneurs, that a lot of the best ideas come to us during downtime. There's a reason why people talked about the muse for so long. It comes to us on a walk or in the shower or late at night or early in the morning. And so it's been really beneficial for people across the board discovering new insights when they create space for themselves during the day to allow that to happen.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts on daydreaming and downtime?
Well, all I could say is I used to spend a lot of time daydreaming and I never got anything done. So since then, I was just a way for me to procrastinate.
It's a balance, me boy. It's a balance, me boy.
Yeah. It took a while to learn that. But you're right. And so.
Well, I think we have to realize that our unconscious is doing at least half the work that we think we're doing on the surface. In truth, our unconscious is doing a lot of the work, and we've got to let that speak to us occasionally. And the only way that kind of comes up to the surface is to quiet down a little bit and let that happen. So if you're sleeping, you're driving your car, you're listening to a song, you're on the hammock, you're working. If you're passionate about what you're doing, you're working all the time, even though you might be playing, enjoying yourself, whatever.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. And I think, a common question that people ask entrepreneurs is like, man, that's such a cool idea. Like, how do I come up with cool ideas? Well, guess what? You got to give yourself some breathing time and connect a lot of random dots, but you've got to listen to the marketplace. You can't just say, man, I think we should do this. It has to be really kind of coming from a true either pain point. But the classic line is, take something that sucks and make it not suck. So you're right. Downtime is really, really important because you can't just say, wow, let's all get together and come up with some really cool idea that'll go viral. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I must have a lot of great ideas because I've been accused of being unconscious, but maybe for the wrong reasons. I don't know. But thank you so much for that fireside update. So it's time to go on to our presenters.
Yes, I want to move on to Cindy Gelormini, the paint diva. So if you've ever walked into someone's house or you're looking for a house to buy and you go into an open house and you're like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. How did it get this way? Well, if you're in northern New Jersey, Cindy may have been there. So welcome, Cindy.
So I'm a color consultant. I'm a Benjamin Moore color expert. And that happened because I was raising 4 children and I started painting murals and faux finishes in the 90s so that I could make my own schedule and be home when my kids got off the bus. And you're looking at one behind me that I did many years ago. And the faux finishes started going out of style and I was on a ladder about 24 feet in the air and I almost fell off. And I said, you know what, I'm done with this. I've had enough. And I went into the hardware store to buy paint to do a project at home. And I had done murals for all of his kids' rooms. And he said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you just walked in here. I've been looking for a designer to come and work for me and help all these women pick paint colors all day. The guys that work here don't want to deal with that. They just want to mix the paint. They don't want to be held responsible for choosing the wrong color. And I said, sure, that's easy. I don't have to lug ladders and paint cans around anymore. All I have to do is pick a color. Easy. And so I just sort of developed this whole space in there. And I made him redecorate a little bit because I told him women are not comfortable in an environment where it's a bunch of contractors coming in to buy paint all day. It has to feel a little bit homier. And so, we put up curtains and put a nice table and chairs and made it a nicer environment. And people started catching on and they started coming in and I started choosing paint colors for them. And I sort of created my own monster because it got to the point where people would not choose colors without my help. And one day a lady walked in and it's kind of a funny story. There was a paint store in another town where the woman was so nasty to all her customers, they called her the paint Nazi. And she developed this reputation. So one day a woman, after about 6 months, somebody walked in and she looked at me, she says, "Oh, so you're the paint diva." And I was like, "Oh." Confused me with somebody else. She says, "No, that's paint Nazi. She's nasty. You're the nice one." I was like, okay. And I said, "Actually, I kind of like that. It's kind of cute." And then they started making up all these names for me. I was like the paint whisperer and the paint guru, the paint doctor, because people couldn't understand how I did it. How did I make it so easy? And it's just because of from painting the faux finishes and stuff. I had worked with the paints. I knew what was going to happen with the colors. At the time, beige was all the rage, and I could look at it and say that one's too green, that one's too pink. This one is good. But it really all comes down to you have to match your stuff. I mean, to me, it's just common sense. Bring me a cushion off your couch, and I'll show you what color goes the best with your couch. It's a process of elimination, and I would pull away all the colors that didn't work.
Wow,
so I did that for 11 years. I've been on my own for about 5 years now. And this has been the busiest year I've ever had because everybody's working from home and everybody wants to do projects at home. And they all want to, redo their space. And through that, a lot of clients that I was working for were getting ready to sell their house, or they either bought a house, they want to paint the whole place before they move in. They're overwhelmed with choosing one color, let alone choosing every color for the whole house. I get it done in an hour, boom, I'm out. And because I work with so many buyers, when I work for a seller, I will tell them, I know what all your buyers want. They all want the same thing. They all show me the same stuff. And I know what their favorite colors are. So that's what we're going to put in your house. So that's going to appeal to your buyer. And then I kind of got into staging, but this past year I haven't had to stage anything because the market has been so crazy and so hot. So
that's really great. I want to ask you a question though, Cindy. Is color awareness natural? Is it just something that you're born with, you think? I mean, obviously you've developed it by having.
Yeah, well, I was always creative. I mean,
I would say that I have absolutely no skills in that area whatsoever. So how do you do it?
Well, I've learned from someone that there's something called being a tetrachromat. I think I'm saying the right word, where you have an extra cone in the shape of your eye, right? And some people can see colors better than others. And I've learned that a lot of men are a little colorblind. They don't want to admit it, but they kind of are, so when I'm choosing colors and I'm looking at, 20 shades of gray, and I'll tell, and, I'll say this one's a little purple, it's a little green. Usually the husband's like, I don't even see that. I don't even know what you're talking about. They all look the same to me, and they walk away.
Right. Like I can't tell the difference between my blue pants and my black pants,
Yeah.
So
exactly.
sometimes I get them mixed up, and
so you're a little colorblind. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I do want to compliment your wall behind you, though, because this has been the past year. When I do an office, I do it differently now. I don't match your couch. Now we walk in the bathroom and look in the mirror, and I choose what color makes you look best on a Zoom call. Deep blue looks
That's very smart.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the compliment on the color. It was actually my daughter and our family used to go to a certain Red Lobster, it wasn't Red Lobster, legal seafood restaurant. And we sort of ripped off the colors from them. And so she actually ended up, this is one of the colors, and that's how we got it. So
yeah.
I
and
hope
your
nobody
ascot,
from
that
there is
that
listening.
Green color ascot looks great against that blue. And that's like my logos are always those colors. So yeah, good branding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then I ended up getting my real estate license too, because so many of my clients would say, "Oh, just so you know, we're getting ready to put our house in the market in the next year." So I did that for about 5 years, but it was not for me. And I wish I had an app that could have helped me, because trying to juggle both of those businesses at the same time was just totally too overwhelming. And a year ago, I said something needs to go, and I gave up my real estate license just to focus on just doing my paint diva work. And then I ended up writing a children's book series and illustrating it. And I didn't know that would also turn into sort of a full-time job now with doing podcasts. And I created my own podcast now, focusing on autism. And so, yeah.
So what's the name of your children's books?
Oh, it's called Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures. It's stories from when my son was a little boy. And at the end of every chapter is a mom's minute where I address the adults, because I know that a lot of parents and teachers will read it to their kids. And so each chapter tells a funny story about how when I was the brownie leader, I turned around and he was gone and he had run off, and I found him in the brook, splashing in the brook. And then I explain in the mom's minute, that's called eloping. They're usually fascinated with the water. It's very important for them to learn how to swim at an early age, things like that. So there's 12 chapters altogether, and I painted the illustrations because I'm not a computer person at all. I'm not good with graphics on the computer. What I know is paint. So I painted 340 illustrations. And because who knew that we were going to go into lockdown, right? And I for 2 months, I had all these paintings spread out on my dining room table, and I did them all. And my son passed away 3 years ago, so it's all in memory. It's in his memory. But as I was doing it, I realized what a great teaching tool this is for teachers to use in their classroom, because they keep kids. Inclusion is big now. My son went to school for all autistic kids, but now they keep them in public schools. So my hope is that children, the neurotypical children, when the teacher reads it, they'll fall in love with Robbie the Penguin. And then if they see a fellow student who's maybe stimming or rocking, and instead of the kid saying, "Oh, that's weird," they'll say, "Oh, I get it. He's just like Robbie the Penguin." And it'll,
That's very thoughtful and constructive project. So
Yeah, I think it's good you got out of selling houses, because honestly, there aren't that many good color people, and there aren't that many people that could take autism and turn it into books like you've done. I mean, that's
they're
really...
they're two totally unrelated things. They sort of are, but so, but somehow every time I do a podcast, I hit on both subjects somehow.
Good for you.
So Tosh, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I was really intrigued, Cindy. Fantastic that you've nailed your your market, and it's a very needed solution for sure. My curiosity is, is your model to kind of scale up the Paint Diva business, try to find other kind of, what is it called, tetrachromatic people, put your little footprint in multiple Benjamin Moore stores? I'm just curious, sounds like there's a really cool opportunity.
I have two ideas. I mean, I've been working on a book for 4 years on how to choose paint colors for every room in your house, because I keep using the same speeches and the same method that I kind of came up with over and over again. And I finally figured out how to put it into a book without being brand specific, and just using that common sense, match your couch, match the, it won't work. It's not going to help with someone that's colorblind, but maybe they can ask someone else in the family, "Hey, take a look at this and tell me which color looks the best." And then that's something that I'm hoping a book like that could be in Home Depot, Lowe's, every store that sells paint, Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore. I mean, the potential is huge. Just how to pull that off and make it happen is another story.
Sure.
And then I also thought about doing training and teaching other people how to be color consultants like I am, and just use all the knowledge that I have and teach. That's a whole lot of work.
That sounds great.
So, unfortunately, we're out of time for this segment. We're on a strict schedule here. But Cindy, it's just been wonderful talking to you. So what's the best place for people to find you?
I'm on Instagram as the Paint Diva, and Facebook.
Okay.
And then if they want to find out more if they want to see my podcast and buy the books and everything, I have a website. It's robbiesworldbook.com. And that is the link to the books, the podcast. And I have 2 Instagram pages. I have 3 or 4 Facebook pages. But if they just go, robbiesworldbook.com or the Paint Diva, they'll find me.
Okay, excellent. Well, listeners, you are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventors Show on WOR 710, the Voice of New York, with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventors Show on WOR 710 with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. And now we are on to our final segment. If you've missed the show, podcast will be out tomorrow on all the major podcast sites. And you can also see everybody on our YouTube channel, which is Passage to Profit Show. But now I want to introduce somebody that I had just a fabulous conversation with a few months ago, Matt Strandberg, and he's really helping people live their best lives. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you for introducing me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Right. So tell us what your approach is and how you help.
Totally. So I'm a strength and conditioning coach as well as a registered dietitian, and I founded Matt Strandberg Consulting many years ago. And the reason why I founded this consulting practice was because over the course of my career, I had worked with lots of different people ranging from elite level athletes to D1 athletes, as well as your average weekend warrior, your business executive. And what I found was there were lots of different strategies for success, but a lot of times people would try to employ a strategy for success and find that they would find themselves self-sabotaging. And so I often would think about this, and what I found was that most people are often overloaded with information about food and exercise, but often struggle to find the wisdom needed to nurture these relationships. So finding that wisdom that we're talking about has been my mission for the last 10 years. And I've put in thousands of hours studying and training and practicing, so that way my clients don't have to. And really the purpose of my sessions with my clients is to equip them with the skills and the mindset needed to filter out the noise, build that confidence needed to master the art and science of, the nutrition aspects, as well as exercise and physical activity and overall holistic wellness. And we do this by jointly developing sustainable solutions together.
That's great. So how long do you typically work with a client? Is it a long-term engagement, or is it shorter, or what's sort of the sweet spot for that?
Yeah, it really depends on the individual and what they're hoping for. So some people will enter with a high level of development and they're just having difficulty troubleshooting a very particular context or a very particular problem. And so that might be like 3 to 6 sessions where we're doing a very thorough assessment, and then we're addressing it collaboratively together to target certain areas and explore different tools or frameworks. And then, the end goal is really that they look me in the eye and say, hey, I got this from here. Thank you so much. I feel confident taking this here on out. That being said, lots of people come with more complicated challenges, because what we often find with food and physical activity is that it appears simple on the surface, but it often intersects with so many different aspects of our lives. And so in those instances, it might be on a little bit more long-term basis, because what we're doing is we're really getting in there to understand the underlying frameworks that have developed so many years in relation to how people conceptualize, experience, and navigate food and physical activity and their health and wellness. And then throughout that process, we're maybe deconstructing some of the unhelpful or dysfunctional patterns and then collaborating to cultivate that new framework. And that will vary from individual to individual. It could be a couple months or years, depending on the situation. But regardless, the end goal is always the same, that the person leaves saying, you know what, I got this. This is sustainable and adaptable.
I think maybe Matthew is also uses hunches. I think when you and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you evaluate one of your clients, you're probably sort of thinking of a framework as to what's going on with this guy or gal's life, and connecting that together. That's sort of the other thing, other than daydreams, is what I call hunches, which are strong indicators of going one direction or another, and it requires the experience that Matthew has to really lock into that.
Yeah, totally. And so maybe like another word for hunches that might resonate with some of the people here is intuition. So oftentimes when people think about, intuition, they think about this natural body wisdom or something that comes to them. And although that might be the case for certain individuals, from my experience, what I have often found is that intuition really is exemplified in the development of patterns over time, like you said, through practice and being really intentional in terms of tuning into those patterns. And with mentorship and the right environment, you begin to develop better and better intuition, and you, quote, can have those hunches, which are essentially heuristics or educated guesses. And the more you practice, the more it integrates on a deeper level, the better you're able to just reflexively or intuitively have a hunch of what's going on. And this is actually the process that I aim to work with in terms of clients. People often look at other individuals and they go, why does that person just eat without stress or anxiety? They make it look so easy. And that's actually one of the sad parts of our society is people think it just comes naturally. However, in many of those instances, those people have practice in the right environment and have access to the individuals that help them model those relationships. And so it does look like it's just a reflexive process, but you can develop that art form in terms of the hunch or the intuition. So that way you can reflexively and intuitively navigate these environments without having to whip out the calculator, the spreadsheets, or to sit there and go to your diet book. That's really the overall goal, is that people can use intuition or those hunches on a day-to-day basis. So that way it's just more fluid and streamlined and much more enjoyable.
I think this whole process sounds exciting for anybody who wants to improve their health mentally, physically, spiritually. And we can all use it because, especially after the pandemic, and now we're trying to get out of the pandemic, we're all under incredible amounts of stress, and we don't know it. Our eating habits have changed. Our sleeping has been upset. And we have a lot of damage to repair. So we go gently and steadily into finding a new way to live healthfully.
Definitely.
It's not good to go back to the old ways.
Right.
And I actually,
Go ahead.
I would say that's a fantastic point. And actually what the pandemic has revealed is that many people have often developed, like I would call like a system of navigation that has worked and helped them traverse various landscapes for an extended period of time. However, with the pandemic, there's been such a change across the board in terms of these landscapes. And so oftentimes people had dietary patterns or exercise patterns or ways of approaching health and wellness that was working for a while. And they're using that same navigation system in this new environment, and they're starting to get lost, or they find that they're coming back to the same kind of barriers or challenges. So a big part of this process is helping people, quote unquote, update their navigation system and work together to essentially extract and identify the things that are functional and really helpful in their day-to-day life and aligns with their overall values and their goals and is sustainable and adaptable, and then identify the things in the navigation system that are dysfunctional and leading back to those forms of self-sabotage or those roadblocks. And the goal is that even if there's another pandemic or whatever comes your way, that new framework, that new navigation system will, just like a GPS, will be able to identify, oh, this path is now blocked. However, this is another feasible route. And that way people are able to adapt, as opposed to just saying, this is the only route I know, and so I guess I have to deal with traffic jams and roadblocks for the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm sorry.
Everybody's had a tetanus shot. Everybody's had the flu shot. I hope everybody should get the COVID shots. It doesn't hurt you. It can help you.
Yeah.
I agree. So I'm sorry, but we're out of time for this segment. But yes, let's all be as healthy as we possibly can.
And it sounds like Matt has a unique approach. Lots of times there are trainers focus on exercise, or there's dietitians focusing on diet, but really it's a combination of those two together, and understanding that, I think that would help a lot of people achieve their goals.
Right. So you can find Matt at strandbergconsulting.com, spelled just the way it sounds. So listeners, you are listening to WOR 710, the voice of New York, Passage to Profit, the Inventor Show with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart. And we'll be right back. Well, welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Passage to Profit, the Inventor Show on WOR 710 with Richard and Elizabeth Gearhart.
You are.
And we've had just a fabulous show. If you missed it, go check out our podcast tomorrow, Passage to Profit Show. Go to our YouTube channel. But now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what you missed if you did miss it, or what you heard if you were here. So we had Hugh Karraker and John Maher, and they talked about their documentary, All Things Bakelite. And you can find that at allthingsbakelite.com, the origin of plastic and what it's doing in our lives now.
And it's a great and entertaining documentary. So it's worth your time to see it. We highly encourage it.
And then we had Adhav with Leasecake. So if you are a commercial property owner or renter, you need Leasecake. It's amazing this hasn't existed till now.
Why didn't I think of that?
Right.
I wasn't dreaming the right way.
It helps you keep track of everything.
That's right. And it's simple to use, which is so important.
You can find that at leasecake.com. And then we had Cindy Gelormini, the paint diva, who's doing just a number of really cool things right now. She can help you find the right colors for your house. She's also got a wonderful children's book series.
And she's got a lot of extra cones and biological things in her eyes that help her really do well with colors.
So you can find her at thepaintdivanj.com. And then from there, you can find her children's books and find out more about her. And then finally, we had Matt Strandberg, who takes a holistic approach to your health with you so that after you work with him, you feel a lot better. And
which is the point.
Yes, you can find him at mattstrandbergconsulting.com.
So that was really great. And we had such a fun time on our show. Before we sign off, though, I'd like to ask our guests if they have any final words for our audience. John?
Well, I just enjoyed being with you all. And I swear, behind Cindy, I think I saw one of those leaves move.
That's great. And Hugh?
I'm just thrilled to be here with you, patent attorneys. Intellectual property, very important.
Well, thank you. We're going to copyright that phrase and use it wherever we can. So thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks to our listeners for listening to Passage to Profit. We love you and we're glad you're with us. We'll be back next week with another episode of Passage to Profit. But before we go, we want to thank the whole iHeart team who makes this possible. Noah Fleischman, our producer, Kenya Gipson, who couldn't be here today because she got caught in traffic, and also our program coordinator, Alicia Morrissey, and finally our video editor, Chatterboss. So thanks everybody for joining us. You're listening to Passage to Profit on WOR 710, the voice of New York.